Hi, I'm Arthur. If you have been watching this channel for a while, thanks. But also you'd know that I'm incredibly indecisive and also jump around quite a lot to different games. And by that I mean like every few months I'll invest an uncomfortable amount of money in a small side game, play it for a few more months with a few friends, then sell everything and repeat the process again. It's been Horus Heresy for a while now, then it was Trench Crusade, but now, oh sweet baby, it's goddamn Necromunda. I picked up the Ashways box on sale when I was at LVO, and I have in fact been living my best life playing the Ironhead Prospector squats. But this has kind of put me in the headspace where, well, I think it's my turn to talk about how lovely a setting Necromunda is. Which, in my opinion, I think it's probably my favorite setting in 40k, though that is subject to change, like most things with me. I want to give you kind of a brief overview of the setting, then discuss the major gangs, the threats that exist in the setting, and kind of just give you an idea of how the game feels. As to be 100% with you guys, this setting is really fun, and so is the game. It's fun in the, okay, I just got shot point blank with a 6-gauge slug directly into the chest, which sent me flying. My armor held up, but apparently I splatted on the ground so hard that I immediately had to remove myself from play. Yeah, that's how the game plays. It's pretty wild, the shit you can pull off in that. Before we dive into the basics and then break down each gang, let's have a quick word for this video's sponsor. You know him and you love him. Gamersups. Fellas, it's your boy, your tasty companion, the juice you know and love, the supplement that keeps me from getting the shakes, the one, the only, Gamersups. With almost 0 calories and a wide variety of totally not degenerate sounding flavors, Gamersups is one of those things that I will always promote as a sponsor, as they are one of my favorites. They're really easy to work with, and they've also sent me a monumentous pile of Gamersup flavors to try so that I can promote it. And as I keep asking for more, you'd assume that that's a pretty big indicator that I'm a bit of a fan. Like always, I'm here to promote something to you all, but today it's something special. See, unlike normally, when you use my promo code, you get a cute 10% off. Today, and until the end of the month, you will get a total of 21% off all purchases using my code, which, if you couldn't tell, is literally over double the bonus that you're normally getting. So if you've been kind of thinking about getting Gamersups, now would genuinely be the best time for that. So use my code BONEZONE at checkout and buy a whole bunch of new and wonderful things, like Gamersups, which I gorge myself on, a tub of soda pressed pear, which, if you couldn't tell what the flavor is, I cannot help you. Crusaderade is fantastic. Pom Pom Punch, awesome. Pick up some of that with some merch, and you get 21% off everything after 3 p.m. EST today. And make sure to jump on this as soon as possible. Let me know what you get in the comments. Thanks once again to Gamersups for sponsoring this video once again. And let's get back to Necromunda. The world of Necromunda is like 2 parts political intrigue, 2 parts gang warfare, and 3 parts lore YouTubers looking at the lore of Necromunda that they always neglect because it's not a Horus Heresy book and stating something to the effect of, wait, they have what kind of chain stealers on that planet? So, in short, it's one of the funnest settings in Warhammer as a whole. We will break it all down, but basically the massive hive world that it is has been around for quite some time. So there are many different noble families, many different recognizable houses, and they have many different hive cities that stretch across the entire planet. The main one we focus on for the setting of Necromunda is Hive Primus, though they have expanded out into the steaming crater filled with radiation and whatever the fuck a Malstrain gene stealer is, which is Hive Secondus, but we're going to talk about that one later. Essentially, if you are ground level in Hive Primus or higher, you kind of live an okay life. Life is just reasonable. You usually are a supplying manufacturer who sends your resources upwards towards the nobility who live on the higher rungs, but your life is pretty good. But say you go a little higher. The higher you go, you find the imperial nobles that govern the planet, and they range from sadistic to the imperial governor Helmar. His entire family lineage is pretty much the same mix of 2 parts political intrigue, 2 parts brutal gang warfare, and 3 parts, oh, he actually did that? Okay. So, to give you an idea, Lord Governor Magistrate King Helmar is the governor of Necromunda, like the planet. He's the imperial governor. And his bloodline lineage is basically the people who've been governing over this planet since they were installed upon when this planet was brought into compliance for the Imperium. See, the thing that makes makes Governor Helmar and his lineage so interesting is that they understand that in order to function as a society, they need to strike a deal where everybody's happy. That means the gangs. So he actually pays several of the gangs, and pretty much his entire lineage has done so, issuing them contracts for money and so on and so forth. And it has led to some pretty interesting plot beats. Like one of my favorites, to give you an idea of how close the government and these illegal gangs are tied together, is that one of the original Helmars, he was slowly getting older, as one tends to do, and because of that he needed an heir in order to pass on the bloodline and not have it go to any of the other noble households. He had a son or an offspring, and it turned out to be sickly and died pretty early. So what he did was he kind of did some tech heresy and half cloned himself in this sort of vat-grown mechanism that made perfect children, using likely kidnapped people to use their genetic code to make stronger descendants for him. So he passes away while these children were born from the strongest people that he could find on Necromunda. They were being raised to be the next governors and the next major nobles of the planet of Necromunda, and the noble house is all banded together to send assassins, bounty hunters, and so on to kill these children, because with them out of the way, then the line of succession has been cut off, and that means all that's left is to determine which of the noble houses is in charge of Necromunda now as the imperial governor. You know, right of conquest. But Helmar was smart, incredibly smart, and this is why he's such an interesting figure, and the lineage of Helmar is such an interesting lineage, as he made a deal and paid off several dozen different gangs and gang houses in Necromunda to protect his kids, and they ended up killing every last one of the assassins sent, as well as the bounty hunters that were sent, and basically told the nobles that if you keep making a ruckus, we're going to have House Goliath, homeboy over here, breaking down your door and cracking as many skulls as humanly possible until you either turn into a viscous paste, and so is your entire family, or you realize that maybe this isn't the best pursuit. So that's kind of why Necromunda is so interesting, as politics and gang warfare are so deeply tied together. But that is the affairs of the upper hives. Let's go a little bit deeper. If you go below ground level, that's when things get shittier, and eventually you hit a bottom area so horrid and so foul that you have reached the Underhives. Below the basement hives of this world, the Underhives are basically an abandoned cesspool of aliens, monsters, gene stealer cults, chaos cults, and so on, that only the craziest and the most desperate of people will dive into. And that is where you will find the majority of the gangs of Necromunda fighting each other for supremacy, because down there you will also find archaeotech, rare weapons, and even suits of power armor that were abandoned by Space Marines, because surprise, surprise, there is actually a Space Marine chapter house on this planet that recruits for the Imperial Fists, which is kind of crazy. The gangs of Necromunda exist in the various lower levels of the Hive, and they battle it out down there to find these weapons to make a profit. They're often given contracts by the different noble houses of Necromunda to do so, and sometimes it is literally just personal, because if I lived next to the Cawdor or the Redemptionists, I'd be pretty fucking pissed off all the time. The smell alone would cause me to be upset, but I'm throwing around names like you guys know what I'm talking about. So let's get into the various gangs of Necromunda and talk about the freaks and geeks that exist in this weird climate, shall we? So let me ask you a few questions here. You ever feel like the orcs are a little too subtle for you? You ever feel like you just wish to be the biggest hammer in a world full of nails? Does the idea of having a gun that has more bullets in its magazine than you have fingers make you confused and angry? Well, then the Goliaths are likely for you. The Goliaths are technically the most recent of the gangs in the history of Necromunda to pop up on the planet, coming from a slave caste of vat-grown workers made to be kind of a weird new breed of docile abhumans that were supposed to be as strong as Space Marines, but not meant for warfare. They were meant to be used as slaves for ironwork, which weirdly enough kind of worked. Now, there were a few caveats. These docile and relatively peaceful Goliaths that were created, they are as strong as Space Marines, if not a little less so. But something that I've learned upon my research, and me and Pancreas No Work tend to agree with this, that reaching the level of strength that a Space Marine can put out is actually pretty easy. Reaching the level of longevity, tactics, reflexes, and so on that come alongside a Space Marine strength is pretty impossible. So the Vatborn Goliaths were pretty much as strong as Space Marines, but they only lived up to about maybe 10 years maxed, and were almost 100% sterile. I say almost, as there were a few that could reproduce, bumping the most muscular of uglies that caused them to produce the first naturally born Goliath member. It actually happened over the course of a couple years, who was significantly less docile, significantly more intelligent, and wouldn't actually die in 10 years, living a life that would, on average, be just relatively shorter than your life, around 50 years at most. These individuals lead a rebellion against the slavers and the geneticists that created them because they are significantly quicker to anger. And this led to them banding together the Vatborn and the Natborn Goliath to form the group of lunkhead beefy men and women that we all know and love. And specifically, they did it to murder fuck their way through the various gangs of the Underhive. After the gang war kind of burned itself out, which happened because the nobles jumped ship due to them realizing that there wasn't really much money in making their own weird ab-humans anymore, so they just let them do whatever they wanted to. The Goliath gang was established. The Goliaths used their skill and knowledge as heavy laborers to produce their weapons and armor of war. And what were they, you may ask? Iron workers, hauling massive boiling cauldrons of molten metal and steel rebars that were used to make hive platforms for new areas of building. They were able to make very crude but very effective weapons. If you're going to play House Goliath, don't expect anything with any degree of subtlety. You're firing guns that shoot shells the size of Coke cans, you're using hammers, you're using axes, and if you want a sword, good luck. Explosives and armor plating is kind of their other more fanciful tactics, but the armor plating itself is used specifically to show off their muscles because, I mean, if you got it, flaunt it, right? Fun fact, all Goliath are born with an inherent addiction to steroids, or at least muscle-enhancing chems. Vatborn Goliath are hyper-addicted to muscle-enhancing chems, so much so that if they don't get a regular dose every now and then, they actually, explode. Natborn Goliaths are similar, albeit the distance between doses is likely longer, and they don't actually explode if I remember correctly. They just probably die due to withdrawal symptoms, but I know, beggars can't be choosers. So, the higher-ups in the gang have implemented a new system, and I should also note the higher-ups in the gang are always Natborn Goliaths, because it's hard to really maintain a hold on any kind of political power when you have the same lifespan as a German Shepherd. So, they created these things. It's a drug-releasing collar that injects a small amount of stims as well as the muscle-building enhancement chems that they need. Just enough to keep them from dying, but also enough to keep them addicted. Now, you may ask, where do these fellas and fellettes, who also probably rock a brain the same size as a German Shepherd, get these chems from? That brings us to the next gang, and one of the more important ones to discuss. The Eschers. These are, an odd one, because they provide one hell of a service. It's kind of a service that the majority of the gangs in the Underhive tend to use. Drugs. An all-female gang, well, sort of. The Escher men are permanently hooked up in the milking room in the back of the majority of gang houses, as men are icky, but let's get into their big thing. See, their backstory is not nearly as convoluted as the Goliath. They're basically just formed from a group of warrior women and men who became incredibly sickly over time after a bunch of generations. They ended up not having the ability to reproduce because the men of the clan ended up being too weak and sickly to do so, so they created some vat-born super Escher women who were free of all imperfections. And this was kind of one of the things to note, that they had a decent knowledge of chemical sciences and biological sciences. This lends itself well to them plying the drug trade across the entirety of Necromunda. And it's not just super meth crack they give to people and make money from. They actually provide Underhive doctors with the chems and drugs they need to treat people, just surgery chemicals and anesthetics that they need to actually help people that are dying. As they may be drug peddling misinterests, they aren't monsters. They are known for being a particularly ruthless gang of people because they have this oh-so-fun tactic where they flood entire areas if the fight isn't going so well with a gas version of Heron Crocofent that would likely make you erupt from every single hole, but they are either immune to it or have gas masks on, so they just show up with guns or stabbies to kill you and steal whatever you got. It's a pretty useful set of tactics that they got, and this is kind of reflective in their gameplay. Unlike the Goliath, they tend to be a lot more subtle. Their weapons are more based around just killing you with chemicals nickels and sliding a knife between your rib cage to stab you in the heart rather than breaking through it with a bigger weapon. It's very useful to note that that's how they operate. And they're pretty fun because, I don't know, chemical warfare is pretty fun. They got gas throwers, gas grenades, and again, the crocofentanyl mega gas that they can throw at you and make you explode into weird fluids is kind of funny. But their weapons are based around the more poisoners, assassins kind of kit, you know? So, with that out of the way, let's talk about garbage men. Cawdor are such a fun faction. Like, if you are going to get into the world of Necromunda for the love of all that is holy, please just start with them. They're basically what you would get if you took the most religious fanatic in the 40k setting, made them addicted to meth, also a trash man, and also enjoyed turning people into religious garbage fires, which basically makes them one of the cooler factions in the entirety of 40k, not just Necromunda, TBH. And you heard me right, they are trash men. It is a bit more complicated, but basically they were a cult that popped up as a side branch to a cult known as the Redemptionists, who were responsible for making people feel that through service to the Emperor they were able to rise above their station and become something more. So the poorest of the poor in Necromundan society ended up banding together under this branch. Now the Redemptionists, to some degree, have been disbanded due to them being a bit too pious and burning too many people, but this ended up with the lowest dregs of the society picking up where they left off. The literal trash pickers ended up making kind of a minor cult of their own. It's kind of the most beaten and downtrodden of the world, and this is what led to the creation of Cawdor. Now, this allowed basically anybody of the lowest rungs of society to rise up, unless you're a woman. Yeah, it's a super patriarchal cult that believes women aren't fit for the battlefield, but there are subsections not related to the House Cawdor that believe in their divine right to be able to fight for their religious views, which basically means that there is an all-female, hyper-religious, garbage woman crazy person called a Necromunda, and I must find them. I must study them for scientific purposes and not my own pursuits. Obviously. Leave me alone. But yes, House Cawdor has a lot of weird and strict beliefs. These stem from their belief in the Emperor being stronger than most. One of the more interesting ones is that once they are engaging in practices involving House Cawdor, they have to cover their face, and to remove the mask that is covering it is deserving of a punishment worse than death, as it breaks their covenant with the house itself. They love using fire as a weapon, and if I could give you a descriptor of how they play in the game, cheap. Everything they have is literal garbage, but because of that, you're paying for literal garbage. It's nickels, it's pennies to buy whatever they have. Sure, it's going to be pretty much worse than everything else that everybody else has, but when you have about a dozen more guys than them, it doesn't really matter, right? Everybody's replaceable, but everybody is usable. Great way to look at it. And also, they have bomb rats, which is cool as fuck. I love bomb rats. House Orlock, probably my second favorite of all the gangs, but definitely my favorite of all the major houses. They were originally a group of ash wasters. These bug-obsessed people that live outside the hives, which we will cover later, but they're for later, not for now, but essentially there was this one guy known as Alandius Orlock, which I'm probably saying wrong, but he was a cool dude. Due to some pretty unlucky but also incredibly lucky circumstances, him and a small gang that was traveling with him ended up getting stuck in an ash storm on the external side of the hive. This led to Orlock taking refuge with his gang inside this massive crashed spaceship that had just landed on the planet and seemed uninhabited. Not only would this be a bit of a big deal, but this would be the thing that would make the Orlock household be so powerful in the modern day. Essentially inside this spaceship was archaeotech so ancient and forgotten that through just the salvage alone they were able to become one of the most powerful houses and currently one of the most long-lasting houses on Necromunda. They had a stranglehold on Necromunda for quite some time, and this has evolved over time because they eventually salvaged the entire ship, but this led to kind of an interesting culture to be brewed in the House of Orlock. Where House Cawdor is for the lowest of the low, House Orlock is kind of the blue-collar gang for the setting of Necromunda, as the majority of the people who are in it are usually just heavy laborers or just ore miners who work in the most shit conditions possible, usually in the ash wastes, who are going to die of some rust lung by the time they hit the ripe old age of 35. See, if you sign up with House Orlock, you're expected to work just as hard, and you end up servicing the gang rather than the high
High Lords that work on Necromunda. But if you work with the gang, you are going to see marked improvements to your life. The effort you put in is the rewards you get out. Now, are you going to be treated like a lavish king, and is there going to be any high-end shit that you're going to get? No, but you're going to get camaraderie, you're going to get support, and you're going to basically just get better things than you would have ever had outside of that. And that kind of is the main way to look at House Orlock. They are the most middle-of-the-road gang, but not in a bad way. Everything they have can be described as reliable. It builds upon things that work. And that's kind of how they are. With House Cawdor, their stuff is cheap and shitty and usually breaks down. But because it breaks down, you could just buy as many as you want. With House Goliath, everything is unstable and incredibly powerful, but just as likely to break down on you. Escher, it's glass cannon shit, but with House Orlock, you don't have any of these like Melta Blast mega cannons or the thud guns. You have the humble auto gun and a bolt gun, and that is going to be kind of your big deal. They will never break down on you. House Orlock gear is known to be so reliable that you could find a family heirloom that has been passed down from ganger to ganger over 200 years, and it is almost confused as a factory new weapon. That's just how obsessed they are with maintaining the conditions of their weapons. Now, this does lead to them not having really big high-end stuff, but everything that they have is incredibly practical. They do not faff around with any of the fancy shit. Sure, they have some cool iconography that is weirdly similar to the Iron Warriors, but like, let's not think about it. But if I could describe them in a few words, it'd be practical, pragmatic, and also kind of a meritocracy, but what do I know? I don't know what I'm talking about most times. Also, yeah, I don't know why they have Iron Warriors iconography. I don't think it's good to acknowledge that. Let's just move on to the next house. House Saar is a fucking enigma, and I mean it. See, part of the appeal of Necromunda is that it's such a small-scale setting. It's on one planet. To compare Necromunda to, say, like the greater 40k setting, and to use the nerdiest reference I could pull out, it's like comparing Daredevil to Adam Warlock. One is a street-level guy who fights a bunch of bruisers and is sometimes seen fighting middle-of-the-road guys, and the other is fucking Adam Warlock. With Necromunda, you are going to be dealing with people fighting with shit that most guardsmen would scoff at, although that, as a fact, is a little bit overblown because a lot of the Necromundan gangs do have tactics that would make most guardsmen terrified. I will say, I'd like to see a guardsman scoff when they have a fucking Orlock harpoon in their chest, but regardless, the level of tech is seen as jury-rigged and lower than average, but with the Saar, it's actually the opposite. Weapons and armor so advanced that most guardsmen actually kind of want it. They have plasma cannons that fire so efficiently and so safely that it makes Space Marine tech seem quaint by comparison. So, how do they have this tech, and what is the trade-off? Well, for one, they have an almost fully functioning STC of all fucking things, able to take in raw materials of any kind and produce futuristic tech so powerful that it is likely from the dark age of technology. We don't fully know where they got this STC. There's numerous different rumors, one being they're from the dark age of technology and woke up in a stasis pods and they've been using this ever since. One is that they found an STC and stole it. My favorite theory is that they stole it from the Leagues of Votann that were on this planet that had an STC that was their Votannic core, and that's why the Ironhead Squats are here. But yeah, so that's what they can do. They put in raw materials and the STC will pump out some of the highest level quality of gear that you could get. But what's the trade-off? It's that the machine, due to just like an error of its production lines, it leaks radiation that slowly kills the majority of the Saar. And by slowly, I mean like actually pretty fast. The big one is that they are actually going to age significantly faster, or at least have the appearance of aging. Which is why if you look at any of the art or any of the miniatures, most of the Saar are old men and women. And that's actually because they're probably just in their late 20s, maybe early 30s at the latest. And alongside that, they also have to deal with good old radiation sickness, leukemia leukemia be upon you, right? Fun fact, the majority of the medications they need to stave off these effects are gathered by striking deals with House Escher gangers. Neat, right? Everything kind of connects at a certain point for the majority of the gangs here. I'll get into kind of my wrap-up afterwards, but I do want to stick a pin in this idea. The Van Saar as a gang prize information above all else. They don't really give a shit much about credits because, I mean, they just find a metal rock in the desert, throw it into the STC, and it becomes a weapon, so they don't really need to care about it. So figuring out how to make new and better equipment is kind of the big deal with them. So that's the main reason why you'd hire them as, say, mercenaries, to get more information, to increase the level of tech that they have. It's why they have these tech hunter squads that go out and just grab shit. The nobles of Necromunda go to the Van Saar for some of the highest level tech they have. It's pretty cool. They also try to keep the location and any information about their STC a secret due to them not wanting smoke with the Cult Mechanicus as well as, well, anyone else, because who the fuck wouldn't want an STC? Which, if you didn't guess, it's one of the most valuable things in the damn setting. They were, like, if the Adeptus Mechanicus found out about the STC, they would blow up Necromunda just to get it. It's kind of crazy how important this is. They work as mercenaries, hackers, and tech hunters for the most dangerous spots in Necromunda, and have the tech to pretty much accomplish any of it. But it makes even just one of their guys an incredibly valuable target if caught out in the open. See, they are so loaded with gadgets and gizmos and rare items that if a single ganger, say from Escher, were to blow one of the brains out, you'd be able to loot their body for a small fortune. But good luck doing that. So for context to the level of firepower these assholes are bringing to the fight, let's talk about the Ash Wastes. The Ash Wastes is an expansion to the regular game that takes place in the Ash Wastes, which is the area outside of the main hives. It allows every faction in the game to play on bigger battle maps, fight in outside housing, as well as bring vehicles, as well as mounts if you're playing things like Cawdor or the Ash Waste Nomads. So it gives them a little bit more mobility and allows them to do basically just Mad Max shit. So you'd realistically be like, so the Van Saar probably have like an armored Humvee or like a tech tank, right? Nah, bitch, I said we're playing Titanfall now. They have the Arachnorig, and it is a literal walker mech that can be deployed. And yes, it has a lot of guns, and yes, it shreds pretty much goddamn near everything to pieces. It's actually really cool. I don't like the aesthetic of most Van Saar things personally, but yeah, the Arachnorig is pretty cool. And that's kind of the thing to describe their gameplay. They will not have a lot of guys on the board when you're playing the game, because the level of, like, equipment that they have is so high that the cost to run them in points and credits is going to run you a lot, but the level of tech that they're bringing is so powerful that you might never need it. They're basically the elite faction of the game. So let's shift gears a little bit. I like talking about these guys because they're cool. So let's talk about something else that's cool. Let's talk about the squid people. Oh, okay, not really squid people, but like, for real, they are probably squid people. Okay, maybe they aren't squids, but they sure as fuck also aren't people. Unless they are? Confused yet? Cool, now you're in the right headspace to talk about the Delaque. So kids, you like squids? Well, if you do, then you should probably play Delaque. I know we're not really off to a great start here, because that doesn't really describe anything that these CIA spooks have that would be conducive to any level of decision making, but please follow me on this. If you like the Alpha Legion and squids and think that they are just a little bit too straightforward with their tactics, then the Delaque is kind of their equivalent and exactly going to fit what you want. They're a faction of gangly pale freaks that shave their heads, replace their eyes, and wear black trench coats, all just to look a little bit more similar to each other, so that they can confuse anybody that would try to pick them out in a lineup. They, as a great house on Necromunda, are known for controlling one of the most important resources on the planet, and that is information, or rather the flow of information. They are obsessed with the collection and gathering of all secrets to be sold to the highest bidder or used to their advantage. These guys don't really have much of a sense of pride, and instead are obsessed with mostly furthering their dark and mysterious agendas. And what exactly are their agendas, you might ask? I'm not going to directly tell you that it's Cthulhu, but, like, it's probably Cthulhu. See, there is two major events that, much like the Alpha Legion backstory, could be complete lies, and if you want to know more, Wes Hammer actually covers a lot of this in depth on his channel. Just, go watch that. But basically, eons before there were people on the planet of Necromunda, there were fish people. These aliens worshipped literal great old ones that they were referring to as just leviathans. Well, as you could
probably tell, the planet is a boiled over dust bowl, so the fish probably died at some point. Or did they? Essentially, there was an event, which I won't go into too much detail about because it's confusing, and it was essentially a sleeping plague where in the middle of the night, there would be a bunch of individuals who would just, I guess, sleepwalk and wander off, either to disappear forever or reappear later changed. This coincided with a planet-asteroid-moon thing coming pretty close into the orbit of the planet of Necromunda. So the theory states that the people who came back from this sleeping plague are now the founding members of Delaque and are either possessed by the ancient ghosts of dead fish people aliens obsessed with reviving old gods, or they just think they are. It's not exactly direct. But regardless, the Delaque tend to operate in the shadows, and though they have a reputation for making people disappear, I think they're cool. I just don't like their bald heads. Oh, and also, they don't have big chunky armor, which is kind of my thing. I just like really weirdly chunky armor. Though their Psygeists and their weird Nachtghouls are pretty interesting. Another thing to mention is that they also communicate wordlessly through a semi-gestalt, semi-psychic consciousness that they're allowed to communicate through. Yeah, it's referred to as the Psychoterica, and we don't know how it's kind of maintained, though a lot of people just assume it's the weird Leviathans using their psychic essence to create this kind of internet for their brains that they can just connect to at any point. It's so that they can convey ideas wordlessly throughout the web of them. It's not really a hive mind. It's more of just, like I said, a psychic internet that they can connect to at any given point. Oh, and also, they allow a xenospecies of heavily augmented squid to work with them, and honestly, I think that's pretty cool. The Pisceans, which they sometimes turn into alien servitors known as Piscean specters, but you know, I think it's an aesthetic. So with the Delaque out of the way, we can get into the next section, which is kind of the speed round, because the next few factions, as although my favorite one is among them, are kind of easily explained as they don't have too much lore. They are not really major houses in the setting, but they are still major players. So without further ado, okay, boys and ghouls, let's get into it. Y'all were waiting for this, and you know I'm excited for it, so let's take a deep breath. And squats. Look at them. Look at them. I love the Ironhead Squat prospectors. I love their neo-retro look. I love their weird-looking bullshit weapons. I love how fat and chunky they are. I love their gameplay style. And I just love the prospector squats so damn much. You want to move fast? Fuck you. You want to have long-range weapons? Also fuck you. You want to have guns that cost less than 80 credits per model? Okay, fuck you. And also, your bolt weapons are now going to cost like 100 credits almost each. But you know what you get instead? Overwhelming firepower and vaguely better tech. The squats are the sweet spot between the Saar and the Orlock gangers, where they get the stability of the Orlock gangers and the moderately increased level of technology that the Saar have. It's kind of this spot in the middle where you're paying a little bit extra to get better things, but not so much that it's abhorrent and you're only going to see 3 guys on the table when you first start your game. I love these guys. They sacrifice range and cheapness for quality. I just love squats. They were the faction that got me into Necromunda, and I'm currently engaging in a campaign with a bunch of friends right now to play them, and I'm having a wonderful time while doing so. The lore is fucking cool. Basically, they were a cleanup crew brought in by the Imperium to remove an ancient xeno-alien species from Necromunda that decided to invade a while back, and the kindred from the Leagues of Votann that showed up decided that they just wanted to stay on the planet. Eventually, they lost their Votann. I like to think that the Saar stole it, and that's where they got the STC, and must use faulty clone vats to keep themselves afloat up until this point, so their tech has kind of not really advanced since then and even has degraded a little bit. They are a law-abiding and proper dwarfy group that are very much going to abide by the contracts and their word. They're just great. And I also love their big dumb helmets. Also, power picks? Big fan. Waste Nomads are kind of funny. See, to kind of ape something Pancreas No Works said, what's worse than living inside of a hive on a shitty planet? Living outside of a hive on a shitty planet. In a location known as the Ash Waste, you can't help but feel there is a bit of a low life expectancy if you're living out there. Thus, the Waste Nomads. We don't fully know who, or really even if these guys are even human, but we do know that they live off the land and steal as much as humanly possible in order to fulfill their needs. All of their weapons are usually stolen, broken, or bugs that they tamed. They raid settlements and are often considered one of the worst things to encounter out in the ash wastes. They are pretty violent as a people. And if you're going to be playing them on the table, they tend to be dicks. They just have long rifles as a basic weapon, which means you basically have sniper rifles that can pick apart anybody with shorter range and ambush them. It's horrible, and I hate them. That's all we kind of know about them. They're just a race of desert bug people, and they're getting new models soon, so that means we're likely going to get like a rule book for them soon as well. Corpse grinder cults are next, and they are probably the easiest to understand. See, on a planet where natural resources are kind of scarce, food needs to be found wherever you can get it. So when the needs are kind of arising, they tend to recycle corpses in 40k into corpse starch and just nutrient paste that they can give to the common folk. Now the problem is that there isn't really an automated machine that does this, so they need to hire commoners in order to do this. So who's the unlucky wagey that gets put in a cagey in order to slice and dice the bodies of his neighbors to make into a fine gruel for the regular folk of this fine planet to consume? Yeah, it's just usually poor people who end up drawing the short stick, and they end up just not enjoying it. Probably the most unlucky few, these individuals eventually snap after a while, because I mean, I probably would, and start hearing voices telling them to skip the middleman and just eat the raw meat. It's fresher anyway, and then eventually, why not just go find some people and eat them before they're even cold? Just do that, it'd be great. Yeah, outside of that, the voices only some of the time are actual psychosis, as in 40k, we can't really have anything be a normal psychological phenomena. It's usually just corn whispering sweet nothings in their ear, and thus the corpse grinder cults arise. They are a problem, they're not nice people, and they're honestly just kind of the most evil people on the planet, because all they just want to do is eat people. So not much black and white about that. They're just cannibal raiders that want to kill you with chainsaw axes. It's kind of metal though. I think they're really cool. If you want me to describe what their gameplay is like, they're a corn worshipping gang of cannibals. What do you expect? They're gonna run at you with axes. That's all they do. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go from bad to worse. Let's talk about the thing that any ganger, cultist, or bug person never wants to see. The squids? Oh yeah, they shake in fear at the sight of this next group of individuals. They are something that all criminals in the Underhive fear more than anything else, more than an amble, a gene stealer, or a wayward noble coming down in a power armor to go harass the poor people, and that's the fucking cops. Yeah, the Palanite Enforcers are what you would get if police brutality had a scorecard attached to it, and with every person that you bury on your patrol, you get a little stamp on said card, and if you get 10 stamps, you get a free yogurt. And by God, if there is one thing that the Palanite love more than police brutality, it's yogurt. Luckily, they kind of got handed... What the fuck am I even saying? So the Palanite Enforcers are basically the police officers made to deal with the gangs in the Underhive, ash wastes, and hell, wherever you told them to go. To be honest, they'd probably go to Hive Secondus, that bombed out goddamn crater, just to see if there is any cancer-ridden gene stealer about to litter that they can violently accost. The Palanite are one of the funnest factions in the game, because unlike the gangs and hordes of other factions, the Palanite have one major benefit to them: mandated supply lines. They are literally funded by the government, so they can just get what they need to get most of the times without having to make any raunchy deals with anybody. Now, of course, they will make deals with gangers from time to time to get what they need, but they don't need to, and that's kind of the interesting part. They are an incredibly organized and dangerous foe, so I think that makes them one of the more interesting threats to discover in the Underhive. The Palanite are some of the most interesting and fun factions to play, as they play exactly like you would expect. They play like you're playing a normal 40k faction of regimented individuals. But fun fact, they also do struggle with the oftentimes bizarre and random nature of the gang violence in the Underhives. And that was kind of all the major factions of Necromunda. I mean, sure, we could talk about the Spire Hunters and the Malsarian Gene Stealers from Hive Secondus, but their lore is pretty simple, with one being the upper-class rich folk dropping all pretense and just LARPing as Space Marines for a day to go hunt poor people for sport, while the Malsarian Gene Stealers are just gene stealers with several forms of incredibly virulent cancer. If there are expansions in the future, I may cover them, but I think I did a good enough job as it is. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm branching out and talking about more of the stuff that I enjoy rather than just hitting the algorithm charts as best I can. And it seems like you guys are responding well to it, so the Trench Crusade and so on and so forth videos. People seem to be liking those, so I kind of want to keep doing them. With that being said, I do have a little bit of news. I am going to Adepticon. I'm going to be going there and attending it likely most days, though I don't know how long I'm going to be there every day. I look forward to seeing you all there if you are going. And yeah, we'll be organizing that relatively soon, and whoever wins, wins. And yeah. So because of that, I would like to issue a special thanks to Adepticon for allowing me to kind of do this giveaway. But also, I kind of want to give a special thanks to my channel members, because without you guys, I wouldn't be able to afford to even go to Adepticon, especially after going to LVO this year. I kind of want to hit the streak of all the major Warhammer events and meet you guys in person, you know? Actually leave the cave that I spend most of my days writing and editing and recording and then doing all of that wonderful nonsense, as well as communicating with several individuals. And yeah, so with your help, I'm able to pay my editors, pay for my bills, and just do this as a job. I'm upgrading my setup even as we speak. I've got new assets on the way, and I couldn't do any of this without you guys supporting me as a channel member. And if you guys would like to support me, as well as gain access to a bunch of different perks, like an extra couple videos a month, and videos the second they're done, uploaded, and so on, then become a channel member today. Thanks once again for watching. Until next time. Man, you guys are not ready for the next video I'm uploading. I just hope to God you guys like cats.